In the 9th century CE, deep within the streets of Baghdad, rumours circulated of a man from Farab, known as a garden keeper by day and town watchman by night, so skilled in the art of music that he would enchant groups of people, forcing them to sleep against their own volition. Such is one anecdote that has been passed down in relation to the philosopher Abu Nasr Muhammad bin Muhammad Al-Farabi. While the anecdote may very well be a legend, Al-Farabi, who would come to be known as Al-Farabius or Abu Nazar in the West, contributed substantial knowledge to the medieval world, from the Eastern to the Western Hemisphere. Widely respected as a key pioneer of advancing commentary and building upon the exegeses of the ancients, Al-Farabi would be celebrated as the bridge that facilitated the continuity of deep thought from the earlier masters of philosophy to the Middle Ages, earning him the nickname of the Second Master. While Al-Farabi's name indicates that he was born somewhere in the region of Farab, it is unknown where exactly in the Central Asian area he may have hailed from. Nevertheless, this hasn't stopped modern universities in the Central Asian Khorasan region claiming him as a national emblem. Al-Farabi was born in 872 CE in the Abbasid Caliphate, most likely to a father who worked as a captain in the Persian army, though probably being of Turkish or Turkoman heritage. Growing up in the ancient city of Damascus, Al-Farabi eventually became known as a generally introverted character, and one who displayed traits of modesty and asceticism. Yet, being a man of outlandish attire, the occasional acts of showmanship are also attributed to him, presumably due to his intimate rapport with the governors and elites of the empire later in his life. Living through the reign of 6 caliphs, Al-Farabi offered his academic services across the caliphate, and was greatly admired by a Hamdani prince in Aleppo who advocated many educational policies. As well as this, Al-Farabi also offered educational aid across the oases of North Africa. Yet, like nearly all scholars of the time, he could not avoid being lured to the intellectual centre of the medieval world, Baghdad, and migrated by the age of 40. By now an accomplished thinker and a man who displayed a love for knowledge over religious division, Al-Farabi studied, debated, and worked in a cosmopolitan fashion, with famous names of the age, including a certain Christian scholar by the name of Yahya ibn Adi. It was with him where Al-Farabi would be described by future historians as the first truly systematic philosopher in Islam, tirelessly striving in the fields of logic, political philosophy, metaphysics, and music. Al-Farabi became one of the greatest expositors of the works of Plato and Aristotle, writing commentaries and comprehensive introductions on their works for later philosophers to use. He wrote the most important medieval treatise on music, and as well as all this, he was further noted as an outstanding logician, linguist, and judge. Spending hours upon hours reading over, commenting upon, and discussing the works of the ancients, most of Al-Farabi's philosophical ideas stood upon the basis of Platonic and Aristotelian frameworks. In a similar fashion to Al-Kindi, he wrote much on the existence and nature of God, or a first being, a cause of all causes, eternal and free of any imperfection. Yet, what was more unique to Al-Farabi was his work on human behaviour, the purpose of the soul, and man as a social and political being. Al-Farabi was united with Aristotle on the notion that human beings were not here for a life of seclusion. Human perfection, he wrote, for the sake of which human nature was ordered, is not possible without human association. At a time where many sought to realize their full potential by retreating to the deserts and forests, Al-Farabi maintained that the ultimate purpose of life lay within the pursuit of happiness, and that it was only through philosophical reasoning with fellow human beings that one could achieve true bliss and connection to God. He wrote out the practical guide to this in his famous book, Opinions of the Inhabitants of the Virtuous City. In it, he marks off society into 3 parts from general to specific. The world, which is constructed upon all the different nations of the planet, which in turn are made up of various city-states. Inspired by Plato's Republic, Al-Farabi attempts to conceive of a utopian city-state built upon a fusion of Islamic and Platonic virtues. Before presenting this ideal and perfect city, however, Al-Farabi draws our attention to the generic and defective cities we already reside in. Among them are the ignorant cities, the worst type for Al-Farabi, where no citizens seek true wisdom and knowledge. Instead, they are preoccupied with endeavours of wealth and pleasure. There also exist timocracies, where citizens are obsessed with power or honour, leading naturally to tyranny and despotism, and democracies, which lead to lawlessness and anarchy. There also exist wayward cities, whose citizens had apprehended God, the afterlife, and the moral code required, but had failed to practically live by it. Perverted cities, which although had once been on the correct path, diverted from righteousness. And erring cities, whose inhabitants failed to philosophize correctly, and thus held false beliefs about gods, and likely followed false prophets and charlatans. In opposition to all this, the virtuous city is one that through proper philosophy had apprehended God, the afterlife, and sincerely lived by virtue and avoided vices. One such virtue being justice, which, according to Al-Farabi, leads to the division of labour and class in humanity. And what follows from this is everyone contributing to their community according to their aptitude. The virtuous city's leader would be pious and intellectual, with qualities of justice, honesty, athleticism, eloquence, nobility, and courage. Yet, as long as people continue to live in ignorant, perverted, or wayward cities, they would never be able to recognize true virtue and never be able to live under a perfect ruler. Indeed, while the dream of the perfect city-state is yet to be realized, what cannot be doubted is the massive contribution and foundation that Al-Farabi constructed for philosophy in the Muslim world. Being the first scholar to create a system of disciplines that is still popular today, a system that made clear the demarcation between physics and metaphysics, mathematics and logic, there does not seem to be a field of knowledge that he missed. Dying in Damascus at the age of 80, Al-Farabi would become the inspiration for a plethora of thinkers and polymaths in the centuries after his death. Today, he is remembered as a key pioneer for all scholars and students, political scientists, and musicians alike.